Thank you. Well, my daughter is actually getting ready to leave to go play softball down in Florida. She plays for John Carroll University up in Cleveland, and she's a pitcher. And no, I do not ever get in the batter's box and try to hit her because I don't want to embarrass myself. And we also have another daughter who's 9, going to be 10 years old, and she's learning how to pitch as well. So while we've been traveling all over the state and all over the country, chasing my 21-year-old around, we are now getting ready to start chasing my soon-to-be 10-year-old around the state as well. So, well, good afternoon to everybody. It is afternoon now. It's almost 10 after, so thanks for having me here today. Orville asked me to talk about today's leadership topic, and so I think that with all that's been going on around the country here recently, that's a pretty important discussion topic to be having. It's a pretty huge topic, and so I'll try to do what I can. There's been a lot of authors that have had this topic in mind, and when they've written some books here recently over the years, and it's a pretty important cause. But I will try to do what I can. We might live in a different world these days, but any of these books that they've written would give a much fuller view of the topic, but I'm going to try to give you just a few of my thoughts. At its core, leadership equals influence, and leadership also determines effectiveness. The list of successful endeavors without competent leaders is a short list indeed. Orville told you I'm the youngest of 12 kids. I have 7 sisters and 4 brothers. A couple years ago, my oldest brother passed away. And being the youngest in the family, it always seemed strange to me when my older brothers and sisters looked to me to be the leader. And when my brother Mike passed, everybody was kind of looking around. When the patriarch passes away, my parents passed away a long time, 12, 13 years ago, 14 years ago, and so when my brother passed, everybody was kind of looking around, wondering how we were going to handle it, and so we got to plan a funeral, we've got a lot to do, and so they kind of looked to me to figure out how we were going to deal with all this, and so I just really didn't want to take that on necessarily, and so I thought, how do I deal with my older siblings looking to me to be the one providing the leadership in the family at that time? And so I made a few suggestions, they made a few suggestions, and so I decided it was time to delegate. And I guess in some ways that's what leaders do, but the other side of it was I thought the best way to be the leader at that point was to delegate so that they could take some leadership as well. And so I delegated leadership to them. And as most families do, we ended up fighting. But it was the best. I thought the best way at the time was to be able to allow everybody to have a little bit of ownership in the process, and it allowed through some of the fighting that went on amongst the siblings. It allowed us to come closer together as a family, and it thankfully for me, it took some of the pressure off of me as everybody's little brother, because it's funny, as much as they looked to me for leadership at the time, they also they look to me as the one to get everything done. They also very much still look at me as their little brother. How could they look at me as anything other than that? I'm their little brother. And so it was an interesting time. We've come through it, and it's sometimes strange to be looked at as the kind of the patriarch in the family when I'm younger than all of them. But at the same time, they seem to be grateful to me most of the time, and other times they still look at me as their little brother. And so it's an interesting family, as all of you know. Families are unique, and it's hard to be a leader of a family and be their little brother at the same time. There's all kinds of different types of leadership, and there's a lot of misconceptions about what leadership is. To begin with, there's a difference between being a leader and just being the boss. Here we are in county government, and a lot of us are bosses. A lot of us, everybody's got a boss. But there's a big difference between being the boss and being a leader. We've all had that boss at one time or another, right? That boss. We all have known somebody who's great at every other part of their job, but just isn't a good manager of people. That person that doesn't like to be a part of or do that part of their job, and you can tell. The best bosses that I've ever known or worked around approached leadership head on. They didn't have to be fancy. They didn't have to always be right. They addressed problems as they came up. They had a plan for the future, and they were competent. You put all of that together, and you've got somebody that most folks are happy to follow. And that gives you a pretty good idea of what I think a good leader ought to look like. But I also don't think that there's one big thing that all good leaders have in common. There are some traits that a lot of them seem to share. A willingness to put others' interests ahead of their own. A willingness to do the right thing even if it ticks a few people off. A passion for what they're doing. A vision for where they want to end up. Some emotional intelligence. Some discipline. Some focus. Experience certainly helps too, but it isn't necessarily required. If you look at the young people in Parkland, Florida, 17 of their classmates were killed, and their classmates and teachers were killed in the shooting. And they didn't see anyone doing anything about it, so what did they do? They started spreading the word. They raised some money. They chartered buses. They went to Tallahassee and they confronted their elected officials. Don't know if anything's going to really come of this yet or not, but right now they're the ones that are leading this national discussion about guns and safety in schools. I've got a 14-year-old at Davidson High School in Hilliard, and he came home and talked to me about the drills that they're having at their school. It's pretty frightening. I've got a fourth grader in the Hilliard schools as well, and they do drills in their school as well. And it's pretty frightening to send your kids off to school. I'm sure some of you guys are doing it as well. You send your kids off to school, and they have to have drills about how to survive these days. It's pretty frightening for them. It's pretty frightening as a parent. And my son comes home and talks to me about it, and and we were talking the other day about March 14th is. Let me think. March 14th is the National Walkout Day, where for 17 they're supposed to walk out for so many minutes, 17 minutes one for each person that died in Parkland, and so teachers, administrators, students are all going to walk out of school. It's going to happen across the country apparently. And Pat didn't know about it. Or he heard something, but he didn't know for sure. He wanted to ask me about it. Wanted to know what I thought of it. Was it going to be okay with me if he participated, if his school does this? And then March 24th is the march, and so there's going to be people marching on Washington, and there's going to be people marching here in Columbus as well, and marching in cities all over the country. It's a Saturday in late March, and what did I think of that? Could he participate in that? If his friends were going to do that, was it going to be okay for him to march? And then on April 20th is the 19th anniversary of Columbine, and there's going to be, nothing's organized yet, but there's going to be some sort of a protest about school violence or gun violence in schools on that day. And would it be okay if he participated in that? And I told him, I said, Pat, I think it's fantastic that you're asking me these questions, and certainly, you can participate in that kind of stuff. And he's a 14-year-old high school kid, freshman in high school at Davidson, and I thought, I truly hope that there's more kids, and I hope that kids in schools are asking these questions and wanting to participate in stuff like this, and I think it's fantastic that he's asking this stuff, and I hope that there's more kids in his school and other kids in the sophomore class and the junior class and the senior class that are showing that kind of leadership, and that other kids are going to step up, and so there's a lot of different kind of leadership, and so There's other examples of people that are stepping into leadership vacuums that can be seen in the record numbers of women that are running for office around the country this year. There's women that are from every political persuasion who are seeing a leadership deficit, and they're offering themselves up. It takes a lot of guts, believe me. It takes a lot of guts to throw your hat into the political ring, especially for the first time. But these are people who have a passion and a vision and a determination, and they think they're going to change our country. So we see that there's lots of different kinds of leaders. Folks who see a need and they decide to jump right in. Folks who build up young people around them, and then they get out of the way and let them do some good things. People who lead by example, getting into the office before everybody else, who work harder and longer, not letting anything stand in their way. There are people who are relative novices, but who inspire action in others. Dr. King, for instance, was only 26 when he led the Montgomery boycott, the Montgomery bus boycott. And then there's lots of people who have other styles, but many of them whose have same qualities in common, like vision or discipline or persistence, selflessness, emotional intelligence, and their leadership skills can be applied in lots of different settings. So around the office, there are, we all know people who are at work who have leadership positions, but they aren't real leaders. How about, like in a volunteer organization, it's pretty interesting when people show up and they don't have to be there. They're just there to volunteer. That's when you know if somebody's a pretty good leader or not. When folks show up and they don't have to be there, and you're leading a group of people who are there of their own accord, and that's a real test of a leader. If you can lead folks that are there and they're not being paid to be there, they're there because they want to be there, and you can lead those folks, that's a test of a real leader. So we've talked a lot about what a leader looks like, but how about making better leaders and growing better leaders in our organizations? What do you guys think about people do you guys think people are just born leaders? I think that's, when I hear that expression, people are born leaders, I think, I don't believe in that. I don't think people are born leaders. I think that people who seem like they're born leaders, I think that leadership is something you have to grow into. It's something that has to be nurtured. I think there's plenty of ways that you can grow as a leader, and that leaders are molded. I think that there's ways to help grow leaders on your teams. Growing a good leader has to be very purposeful. I think that you can recruit people for your leadership, for their leadership potential. You can tell them that you want to help them grow as a leader. You can mentor them along the way. You can challenge them. Nobody ever got to be better at something by doing something else they already knew how to do. You don't get better at something just because. You got to work at it. You've got to try harder at it. So you've got to push people outside their comfort zone. You got to give them advice. You've got to review things that you've worked on and then keep working on them. They've got to have time and experience. And there's an old saying that leadership is developed daily, not in a day. Unfortunately, these things work whether you're a mentor or the mentee. If you want to grow as a leader, you have to make a list of leaders that you admire and then go out and find a mentor. Ask them to help you. Challenge yourself. Keep a log of your insights and what worked or what blew up in your face. Those kind of things can help you be purposeful about all of the as you're moving along. If you do those kind of things, it can help you be very purposeful about it as you move along. And it's a process. It's a lifelong process. You have to continue to work at it. So one of my favorite examples, as I was thinking about this, one of my favorite examples of a leader has been somebody I met actually when I was young. He's been a leader who's grown throughout his entire life, and he continues to grow, and that's Jimmy Carter. I met President Carter in 1988 when I went to the Democratic National Convention, and he's now 93 years old. And no matter what you thought of Jimmy Carter as a president, because I know the majority of people probably don't have that fantastic of an opinion. He was a one-term president, but he's now 93 years old, and he's an astonishingly accomplished guy. He just continues on in his career. He attended the Naval Academy and served as an officer on submarines. He was a very successful businessman. He served in the state senate in Georgia and then became governor of Georgia. And then he became the president of the United States. And for most people, that's an entire lifetime and an entire career. But then after all of that, he left office in 1991, and his stature just continued to grow from there. He founded the Carter Center for Human Rights, and he's negotiated with other countries on behalf of the United States for release of prisoners and on a multitude of different issues. He worked with Nelson Mandela. He negotiated in the Middle East. He raised money for disaster relief, and he continues to teach Sunday school every week and build houses for Habitat for Humanity. If anything, Jimmy Carter leads more people now than ever before, and it's because that he has continued to work for the things that he believes in. He has vision, he's focused, he's determined, he inspires others to follow him, and he's purposefully continued to grow as a leader even after he's retired from the pinnacle of American politics. And at the end of his life, near the end of his life, he finally is ending up near where he began, and he has submarines named after him after starting out as a submarine commander in the naval forces. So that's a lot more than most of us can probably expect out of a legacy for a legacy, but there's a lot that we can all do to grow as leaders and grow as we continue to try to grow the teams that we lead. So I'm sure there's plenty of time for discussion, but I want to thank you guys for letting me be here today. And there's one last thing I'll leave you with. I guess it's a parable about leadership. Somebody who thinks there's a leader but has no one following them is simply taking a walk. So thanks. Oops.
And what I even thought about is, in county government, there's a lot of senior staff who may have started out in a position to grow. My question is about perception. When you are starting out in a position, you are used to being in that position, and when it's you in that position, and you begin to assume additional responsibilities and possibly some leadership positions, not even necessarily in a title, but maybe over a project or something like that. How do you deal with the perception of your coworkers when you are known to be in one position, but you're starting to be elevated in other areas?
Yeah, that's tough. There's, and when I was young, I was in the state treasurer's office, and I was the scheduler for the state treasurer, and I was a kid. I was a 3-year-old kid, and I was known as the scheduler, and then I got another job, and I became the aide to the state treasurer, and everybody just kind of looked at me as the scheduler, and so no matter what I did, I was just that 23-year-old kid. Here I got to be 27, 28, and they still looked at me as that, and I couldn't get past this perception, and so you got to keep working at it every day, and you got to keep. Sometimes it's tough, and you just, you gotta, one, you gotta persevere, and you just gotta keep knocking at it, number one. But number two, sometimes you have to reinvent yourself, and you gotta take a different perspective, and so, but those can be difficult. I'll tell you what, I've been fighting against it my whole life within my family. There's nothing I can do about it. I'm everybody's little brother. I'm a county commissioner. I'm still their little brother. I got my sister. I have 7 sisters. 5 of them are retired, and I'm still their little brother. And it'll never change. That'll never change. I can't do anything about that. They come to me for help all the time. I can't do anything about it. I'm still their little brother. I'm still the baby of the family. You just have to persevere. You just have to keep working at it. But sometimes changing perspective, going about it from a different angle, maybe moving sections, moving a department. I don't know if that's a great answer or not, but
Anyone else?
Hi, what advice would you give? I've been working for the county for quite a few years, and what I find, especially like a lot of tenured people, to Bev's point, they get, it's kind of hard to find that mentor-mentee relationship, or people get stagnant in the positions that they're in, or very used to, like, this is what I do, this is how it's done, this is how we do it here. How do you approach that? How do you seek out mentors? How do you, how do you seek out mentors within this environment? And in addition to that, how do you just kind of keep it fresh as far as not getting stagnant, because we are in a government position, and a lot of people, it tends to get stagnant sometimes.
Yeah, it's pretty easy to be change averse in county government sometimes. When I became clerk in 2001, that was one of the big things we faced. Was I came in and everybody was very change averse, and we tried to work with people. We tried to we really had to work with folks to be to make sure folks were understanding that while we had to make a lot of changes and we needed to rethink the way the office was going to operate, that we weren't going to upset the apple cart so much that people were going to lose their jobs unnecessarily or anything of that nature. So sometimes you just have to be open-minded enough and willing enough to make some change that and that folks are going to know that life's going to be okay. Now, in terms of finding a mentor or looking for a mentor, there's always going to be folks that are going to be willing. You've got to be able to seek people out, asking folks, talking to folks, within your agency. What agency are you with?
The data center.
The data center. When I got here in 2001, the data center couldn't have had a worse reputation than it did. Over the years, it's evolved, and there's been different iterations of the data center with different directors. You got a new director now. I just met him. I think first time I saw him was today. And so the data centers through county government in the 18 years I've been here, the data centers had different. It's been a different environment, and so I would say that one of the things that you have with the data centers, you touch all kinds of county government. So you've got the ability to get outside the data center and find mentors in agencies throughout county government. And so I would look maybe beyond just the data center for a mentor. You guys touch every agency pretty much, or have the ability to. So get outside that those walls there in the, what are you on, the 8th, 9th floor, 10th floor somewhere? Get outside that environment. Look for mentors outside that environment there. And I mean, you guys have, there's a lot of folks that you can potentially seek out.
I have a quick follow-up.
Sure.
One of the things to be part of people being tenured or being there for a long time is that people are sometimes they're good at their job, as you said before in the speech. They're good at their job, but they may not necessarily be good leaders. But they've been promoted because they're good at their job and they've been there for years. How do you kind of navigate around that? I mean, it's kind of hard if you don't have a good leader to be, and then it's like it takes forever for anything to change as far as that person not being your leader anymore. You see what I'm saying? So how do you deal with that? Because I'm sure that you've been in the position where you've been behind a person that wasn't necessarily a good leader. How do you address that? Because you're still perceived under them.
Yeah, well, that one's always tough. Let's see. When you're the employee under somebody who's maybe technically very strong and and not the knowledgeable about the work environment, but isn't necessarily a strong manager or a strong leader. That one's kind of tough. So what I would suggest is number one, learn as much as you can from them because they understand their business. You know, they understand all of that. So one, take that, learn from that. Always understand and know. It's always important to know and understand the workflow and the work environment. So always take as much knowledge as you can there. In terms of dealing with somebody that's your supervisor or your manager who's not a great leader, that's hard. That's always a struggle for me because as the clerk or as the commissioner, I'm always looking to support strong managers and replace managers that aren't strong. When I've found managers when I've had managers that weren't strong, generally what I did when I had managers that weren't strong was I wouldn't necessarily fire them. I would just move them into a place where I found them to be valuable, and then bring strong managers in. You're not in a position where you can do that. So, I always wanted strong managers, good leaders in those positions, because I didn't want people like you to have to deal with people who weren't strong leaders in those positions. So that's a good one. I'm gonna have to think about how to, because I didn't want you to have to deal with that, so I would put somebody in that position so that you wouldn't have to deal with somebody that wasn't a strong leader. Well, I don't know, because I always wanted you to have to, report up the chain of command, and I wanted you to report to somebody that was a good leader. I'm thinking about this. I'll come up with an answer for you, though. Give me a minute. I'll come up with an answer for you.
Anyone else while he's thinking that? Yeah.
Mr. Brady, do you have any favorite authors or books you could recommend that's on leadership?
On leadership. I read some, back when I ran the clerk's office, I read 3 or 4 Maslow and a couple others that I read because I came in and I'd only managed, a few smaller organizations before I became the clerk, and all of a sudden I had 240 employees, and I was like, man, I gotta start doing some reading here. And I read Tucker and Maslow and a few folks back then, but that was a while ago. That was that was 18 years ago. I read, like I said, Tucker and Maslow back then. I don't know if they were good or not. They were recommended to me, so I read them. And then there were a couple that I took in college. I can't even remember what those were. My philosophy on management is this. Management is a science, not an art. Too many managers, too many folks in management think that management is an art form, that I can figure it out, I can create it, and it's not at all. Management's a science. Management is a structure. And if you treat people differently, then you're gonna screw it up. Everybody, you put in place a structure, and you treat everybody the same. You treat everybody, because the minute you start, treating management as an art form, then you get yourself in trouble. You put in place a table of organization, you put in place reporting requirements. As a leader, as a boss, as a manager, you're not supposed to be everybody's best friend. You're supposed to be friendly, you're supposed to get along, we're supposed to have a collegial work environment, we're all supposed to know each other, we're supposed to know each other's families, all that good stuff. But if at the end of the day, it's all about being everybody's best friend, and you want to go drinking at the end of at 5 o'clock with all your employees, and you want to go fraternize with the help, and you want to go out and go to everybody's house on the weekends and all. If you're going to do all that, you're going to end up getting yourself in trouble, and it's going to be a problem. You need to treat everybody. There needs to be a reporting mechanism. There needs to be, a system of progressive discipline. All those things need to be in place. And if you have all that stuff in place, then everybody gets treated fairly. Your employees are probably going to be feel like they're being treated much more justly, much more fairly across the board. There's going to be an understanding of how folks can climb the ladder of success, how people can reach the next level and get to the next position, how they're going to know and understand the structure within the organization. There's going to be I'm saying all this stuff when Rob Young, our HR director, is in the back of the room, and he's back there critiquing whether or not I'm saying the right things. If you're doing it that way, then there's a much more structured, sensible environment within the organization. And by and large, people are going to have a better understanding of their work environment. You're always going to have disgruntled employees, because there are people in this world, you guys all know them, that when they get out of bed in the morning, the fact that they have to get up because the alarm clock went off, they have to take a shower, get dressed, and go to work that day, they are automatically unhappy, because that's just who they are and the nature of who they are. They don't like to go to work. And there's just people that are like that in this world. Or they're generally happy people, they just hate the job they have. And so, there are people like that. Then there's other people who love their job, and they have to work next to the person who hates their job, and so you get that. That happens. And then there's plenty of people who love their job, love their environment, but they don't make enough money, and so that makes them disgruntled. Or then there's people who, just can't stand Commissioner O'Grady, and so, or some, there's a lot of that, but by and large, I mean, it's so there's I mean, you're going to have people that in every organization, you're going to have a lot of people who love what they do, and you have a lot of people who don't love what they do. You're going to have people who love their leaders. You're going to have people who dislike their leaders, and so you just Yes, sir.
As a follow-up, there's a series of books by Harvard Business Review that covers a lot of topics related to leadership. So they cover coaching, mentoring, leadership itself. For the lady over there, there's a guide to mentoring up and across, which is basically how to be a leader to people above you and other departments around you. So if you're looking for something to read, it's just Harvard Business Review, and that's a guide to it. It's a bunch of different topics. They're fairly small books. I think most of them are under 200 pages. They're pretty quick reads, easy to understand.
Any other questions? Okay, I'll see you all after.
Could you talk about a specific leadership opportunity, whether it be a specific position you've held or a project you've worked on that's brought you the greatest sense of pride, and maybe some of the challenges that you've gone through in that?
Oh man, the easiest ones that come to mind are always the obvious ones, the political leadership, the things that you're doing lately, that kind of stuff. Probably I mean, some of the stuff that we work on in the office, the projects that we work on in the office, this thing we're doing right now, Kroger at Northern Lights decided to close at the last second. You know, Kroger closes a store. They've closed. They're closed one up at Olentangy, in the University District, and they close when Kroger closes a store. They usually give 30 days notice, and they closed one at Olentangy, and they gave 30 days notice, and nobody noticed, nobody cared, because it was in an area that didn't really, economically, it didn't make a big impact, and so nobody noticed. But when they closed the store at Northern Lights, it made a big deal. It was a big impact because they created a food desert, and it impacted a part of the community that really made a big impact. And so we noticed, county government noticed, the city of Columbus noticed, and so we called Kroger and we reached out to Kroger and said, whoa, wait a minute, you can't do this. You're closing. They closed the end of February. They announced at the end of January they were closing at the end of February. So we're like, wait a second, you can't do this. And they said, well, it's done. We're already doing it. And so we said, we need more time. And they said, well, we can't give you more time. This is our business model. This is what we do. So we called them into the courthouse. They came upstairs and sat down with us, and they realized that this was a big stink and this was going to be a problem and they were going to get bad press. And so we had a bunch of representatives from the city of Columbus, a bunch of representatives from county government, and the news media showed up because when I called the meeting, Marilyn and Kevin wanted to come as well. My colleagues, Commissioner Brown and Commissioner Boyce wanted to come. And when we have it, that makes it a public meeting. And so the news media showed up, and so all of a sudden Kroger's like, oh, we have a public meeting and the news media is here and this is going to be good. And so there was newspaper stories and everything was, you know. And so what I said to him was, you know, if you'd have given us 6 months notice, if you'd have told us back in the summer that this was going on, we could have had much more time to do something about this. And the fact that you were closing wouldn't have been so bad. We could have had a community reaction to this. We could have done something. We provided, but you're closing, and it's not just the fact that you're closing and there's a food desert here now, and so the community that needs this the most doesn't have access to the fresh fruits and vegetables. That's a problem. But they don't have access to their pharmacy needs. They don't have access to check cashing. They don't have access to banking services. They don't have access to a lot of things that this community has. Oh, by the way, this isn't like you closed a store in Dublin or Hilliard or Grove City or Canal Winchester. This is you closed a store where people don't have access to transportation, where people don't have. This is people that are like 200% of the poverty level. This is a problem for these people. There's 40-some thousand people that live right in this area, and this is a big problem. And they just kind of sat there and looked at us like, oh, sorry, what can we do to help, you know? Oh, and we'll send some buses over and help ship them to our other store. Oh, so now the moms who are dragging their kids to the store on the Coda bus to get the groceries that they do need, or the pharmacy needs that they do need, or the check cashing that they do need, they're dragging their little kids and they're on their bus, and now you're going to make them get on another bus and go 3 miles away and wait 20 minutes while they do it with their kids. Great answer, thanks. So we held Kroger's feet to the fire a little bit. They told us, okay, what can we do? We said, okay, sublease to us for a year, because they have a year lease till the end of February 2019. So we've been pushing and working. So we had a meeting yesterday. We have Matt Habesh from the food banks coming in. We're looking at what we can do. We're trying to turn this problem into an opportunity. And so we're just pushing and pushing and pushing. I think we're going to get something good out of here. Hopefully we're going to turn this Kroger store into a marketplace with the Mid-Ohio Food Bank, where we're going to provide some ready-to-eat meals along with a small market, potentially turn it into the kitchen there, hopefully maybe into a food incubator for people that want to, in a community that are looking to start with some of our JFS clients. Hopefully it looks like we're going to probably be able to provide the pharmacy and the Minute Clinic and the the banking services and those kind of things. Hopefully that initially, along with this marketplace. And then there's still going to be 45,000 square feet there that we'll be able to hopefully do some of our other JFS, Job and Family Services, services there. So hopefully we're going to turn this big problem into a positive for that community. And oh, by the way, it's on that CMAX bus line that CODA identified as a big deal, and it's in the smart cities community that the cities identified. So this is in an economic development zone that CODA and the city have identified as a positive. So this thing, we're going to turn what Kroger's identified as a big money loser for them into what we think is an economic development positive. You know, so anyway, I'm hoping, we're hoping that in the next 12 months we may have turned a black eye for Kroger into a big positive for us. And so, so I hope that maybe in the next year or so, this might be an opportunity, a leadership opportunity that kind of fell in my lap, our lap, that we get to do something about. But with the whole economic development team, the Job and Family Services team, Mid-Ohio Food Bank, but the whole, county government basically stepping up, and, and it kind of came out of the fact that I just kind of got pissed off. So if that's leadership, then I'll take it. You had a question.
Yeah, so going along those same lines, there is I guess I don't fully understand how the Mid-Ohio Food Bank might work, but there's a Aldi's kind of across the street over there.
Yeah, up on Morse Road.
Is there a thinking? No, I think it's on Save-A-Lot.
That's a Save-A-Lot.
A Save-A-Lot. Okay.
Save-A-Lot's not exactly a great food option, but yes, there is one there.
Okay, so trying to find another grocery store was not an option.
In the area, the Save-A-Lot's the only store that's there, and have you been into a Save-A-Lot before?
Yeah.
So Save-A-Lot's got limited options, right? And so it's not,
Aldi's, like an Aldi?
There's an Aldi, it's up on Morse Road. It's about, what's it, like 3 miles away, did we determine, Lauren? Isn't Aldi's like 3 miles away, right?
Okay, yeah, exactly. So there is one, I know where that is, over in your old Poverty or something.
Save-A-Lot is the only thing that keeps this area from being an absolute food desert. Save-A-Lot's a little bit more than like a Kroger, Turkey Hill, or it's only a little bit more than that. And so that's all that keeps this whole area from being an absolute food desert. And that's serving, like we said, 38 to 42,000 residents. And so otherwise, these folks have to go all the way up to Morse Road. Now the problem is, once you get up there, once you get up there, you've got Costco, Sam's Club, but those are memberships. You have memberships to those. Costco and Sam's Club. There's the brand new Kroger up there. There's an Aldi up there, and then you got to go over to Clintonville to the Giant Eagle and Kroger over on High Street, and then you got to go to like Town and Country, and what's that?
So Aldi's would not be interested?
Aldi. In coming into that neighborhood? Nobody's interested in going into that neighborhood. Like, nobody wants to build a store in that neighborhood. We're talking about, with the food bank, we're talking about putting a small market in that area that would be, like we said, prepared foods, and like a produce market that's smaller than 15,000 square feet. So, a little bit bigger than the room we're in. Twice the size probably of the room we're in. So, and oh, by the way, it would have to be subsidized and it would lose money. It would have to be subsidized. So, anybody else?
I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
You had mentioned that we have a number of people in leadership positions who have leadership qualities, and
Wasn't naming anybody in particular. I was just
Were you
saying
talking about-
every organization does.
right. So
Every organization
that
does.
was partly what the young ladies are trying to get that question. So when you were coming up in your time at the state treasurer's office, I'm sure you identified those type of
Yeah.
people. So let's just take it personally. How did you work around that? When your boss wasn't the type of leader that you needed to look to as a mentor.
Yeah, I found my way around them. I found my way to grow through the organization around those leaders. I found my advancement so that I could get out from underneath them, which is hard. You know, I guess that's the answer to your question I had a couple of bosses that weren't helping me grow, and so I had to figure out how to advance around them. You know, how did I? One, I got out of the department that I was in, and the other one, I got out of the agency that I was in. So moved out of the state treasurer's office into another agency. So
basically, don't be afraid to try to improve your situation.
Yeah. I was also young and single, and had the ability. So sometimes that, that was an advantage for me. I was in my 20s and had the ability to do that both times, and didn't mind. Once I took a pay cut, and the other time I was just young enough and single enough to, be adventuresome enough to just say it's time to make a change. Now I'm old and have kids, and so.
Can't take those changes.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate your time, because you're the actually first elected official that talked about the work that they do. We've had a number of people in. Maybe President Drake talked a little bit about what was going on in Ohio State. But so we appreciate you letting us know your role in the community, not just the leadership among your staff, but the leadership in Franklin County and economic development. So it's interesting. Most of us know Northern Lights area, and it will be devastating if they lose that food source, and sad. So I appreciate you stepping up to get involved. So you talked about leadership. Commissioner O'Grady said he just personally felt interested in that topic to get up there and talk with them, and then the others followed him. So sometimes leaders actually have leaders follow. So that was important. It was interesting that you said that, because once another commissioner shows up, it is a public meeting, but they are also willing to follow. Good leaders are willing to follow. So remember that, and I don't know if that was one of the things you were leaving as a takeaway, but take that away with you as you leave. Good leaders are also good followers. So. Any last questions before we just thank him for being here?
Sorry, it's not a capstone question.
Maya, we need it.
True, at the same time, like you're bringing up that CODA has identified this as a potential strip to have that dedicated line running, and then like what they've done around Joyce with widening the street and putting the bike trails or widening the sidewalks and pouring all this money into the Linden area. But how is it true at the same time that they're dumping this money into this area? Also part of the issue with people having the tax abatement issue for the Easton area. Well, aside from what their issue was with the tax abatement itself, it was to be a $4 million kickback into the Linden area. But then you're saying in reality, nobody wants to be there as far as business. How are those true at the same time?
So it's the line. First of all, it's the line. CODA's identified the line, and it's the transportation line up and down. It says Bus Rapid Transit system that they've got, the BRT. And so CMAX, it's called, BRT. And so it's the transportation basically between downtown and Westerville. So it's the whole, and they're sinking a lot of money into the improvements up and down that line. And, but, you know, why? I mean, businesses haven't gone into the Northern Lights Shopping Center in forever. The owner of that center is from New York. So the folks who own that are not of this community, so they're not investing any money. They're not here, so they don't invest any money back into it. The landlord, we wish the landlord was invested and was from Columbus, but they're not. They're from New York, so they're not reinvesting in the community. They're just owning it and hoping, you know. So we're dealing with them now, trying to get them to give us a long-term option to be there, so that, and we're not even certain they're going to. You know, if we invest in that Kroger store, we want to know that you know, if we're going to go in there and do the things we're talking about doing there, we need to know we have a long-term lease, and we don't have that guarantee yet. So that's part of this deal is we're trying to work on that, because otherwise our idea doesn't pan out either. You know, the Mid-Ohio Food Bank doesn't want to be there for 12 months, and then, well, not even 12 months, because we're at the end of February now. We'd be there less than a year. We don't want to do that. That doesn't do us any good, doesn't do the community any good. So we're working on it. But, you know, it takes long-term investment. So, you know, CODA's making a long-term investment in the line. It takes others to make long-term investments in the community, which is what we're trying to do. But, you know, private business, only some of it, and it's sporadic, and it's, you know, it's up and down that line, but it's not in that particular area. So that's what we're trying to do. We think it's worthwhile. We think that as government, it's important for us to invest in that community. I personally believe in economic development, that I think it benefits all of our communities, wherever you live. I live in Norwich Township, so I live over in the Hilliard, Dublin, Arlington area, like in between. I live in between Columbus, Hilliard, Dublin, and Arlington, over northwest Columbus area. I think that my community improves because we invest in Northern Lights. Because I think that if Northern Lights improves, that benefits me. I think it benefits Grove City. I think it benefits Canal Winchester. I think that when every neighborhood improves, it improves all of our neighborhoods. You know, economic, you know, reinvestment in neighborhoods makes all of our neighborhoods stronger. You know, that's just my economic development philosophy. That's why I think CDBG money out of Washington is so important for all of our communities. Community development block grant money is money that we get out of Washington that we reinvest into neighborhoods. And Franklin County can only invest it into non-city of Columbus. So the rest we invested in townships and places that aren't in the city of Columbus. Columbus gets its own CDBG money. So anyway, you know, I think if we invest in this Clinton Township piece over in Northern Lights and we strengthen that area, I think it strengthens all the areas around it. I think then it helps to strengthen all of our neighborhoods. It's my opinion, my philosophy on economic development. So, all right.
Well, thank you.
Thanks, guys.